Sadvaitam Sadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahadana Lalita Shiva Shakalatam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This seminar is titled Realities of Life in ISKCON Today and Looking to the Future. In brief, Realities of ISKCON Today. Russian, please. Russian devotees. Results русский перевод. You have to speak a little loud, otherwise другие русские преданные will not understand. Sorry for my poor Russian. So, in brief, this seminar can be called Realities of ISKCON Today. So what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning? First question is, what is reality? What do we mean by reality? There is a saying, hard-headed realist. Have you heard this saying? Hard-headed realist. There's also soft-hearted devotee. So where do these two things meet? What is reality? How are we to view reality? What is reality? Reality to each individual can be understood as his experience of reality. Each person perceives reality in a different way. But then ultimately reality means the way Krishna sees things, because he's the really real person. He's the Vastava Satya, the real truth. So ultimately, reality means to see as Krishna sees, and that's also Krishna consciousness. In one verse in the Bhagavatam, it's stated that Krishna consciousness means to see the universe as Krishna sees it. So in other words, we can understand reality through Shastra, because Shastra means what Krishna has given us to help us to see reality. Because at the present time we see through our own perceptions, which are influenced by Brahm, Pramad, Vipralipsa, Karaya, Partava, which means illusion, the tendency to make mistakes, the cheating propensity, and imperfect senses. So reality we have to understand from Krishna's point of view, and from Krishna's point of view, reality is all bliss. Ultimately everything is all bliss. What is reality? You look in the newspaper, in America dropped their bombs on Iraq yet. This is reality. What is the news? The news is that Krishna is dancing in Vrindavan with Radharani. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is dancing in Mayapur eternally. So this is reality. Of course, we may say, well, that's all right for Paramahamsas, but I'm here, and as many people, totally non-religious people, say, well, it's all right for you to talk about Krishna, but I've got a wife and 3 children, and I can go home and talk to them about Krishna, and they'll say, we didn't eat yet, so where's the money? Reality means go out and bring the bread. Don't talk about Krishna. So that's one level of reality, and for persons who are without bread, that is their experience. They don't want to hear about Krishna. So these are various levels of reality. Ultimately, reality means ananda, simply bliss. And in the material world, it's nirananda, no bliss, only misery. And spiritual life means to come from the position of being in illusion and misery and to come to our actual position of happiness. That means to understand reality as it actually is. But it's not that we can immediately take a high jump into Rasa Leela. There is a method, the process of sadhana bhakti, by which we can gradually become purified so that we can enter into that, we say higher reality, actually that is the only reality. There is a process by which we can follow that. We can follow that and become purified and understand ultimately what reality is. But then, even those who are on the topmost platform, Paramahamsa Vaishnavas, they also come to this material world and preach Krishna consciousness. And when they preach Krishna consciousness, then even though themselves, their own vision is simply to see Krishna and the spiritual world, they also see the world in a different way to that of a pure devotee who's not preaching. In other words, they discriminate according to material categories. A preacher has to see what is right and what is wrong, that there is a difference. He has to see those who have to be preached to, see what is their condition and preach to them. In other words, he has to see this material world, what's wrong with it, and try to correct it. That is the duty of the preacher. So even a Paramahamsa Vaishnava, even though ultimately his vision is only of Krishna and the happiness of the spiritual world, but he also sees the reality of life in this material world. Otherwise you can't preach. So here we are all here, and we are in the position of trying to come to the ultimately pure platform of Krishna consciousness, where this reality is perceived as simply the spiritual bliss of being with Krishna. But then even if I were to attain that, still the order of Srila Prabhupada and all our acharyas is to preach Krishna consciousness. So we have to retain somewhat of the vision of seeing reality in a manner that is, we could say, practical to the affairs of this material world. So I'm going to discuss in this seminar something about realities of ISKCON today. So reality, there are so many levels. From Krishna's point of view, he's standing with Radharani and the Ashtasakhi, and he's simply smiling all the time. You don't see him getting a headache or any such thing. But it is the duty of his devotees to always serve him in such a manner that he can go on very nicely, enjoying. And this movement is meant, as Prabhupada has written in one purport, that the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement is that those who are participating in it, they can take part in the Rasa Leela of Krishna. This is the purpose of ISKCON. Prabhupada has written in several places, he's defined the purpose of ISKCON in various ways. In one place he said that the purpose is to join the Supreme Lord in his pleasure dance. So, reality. We're going to take a bit of a hard-headed look, hard-headed realism, but not simply hard-headed, because devotees are supposed to be soft-hearted also. I've heard it said, it's one of those Prabhupada says. You've all heard many of these Prabhupada says. I've heard that Prabhupada said, I'm not sure if he said it, but even if he didn't say it, it's repeatable because it's an interesting outlook on reality. that a devotee should see with one good eye and one bad eye. In other words, we are, and this is how I understand it, devotee is supposed to see the good in everything. He's not supposed to be a fault finder or a critic. But at the same time, a devotee should be discriminatory. He should, on one hand, you have to see the good in everything and everyone, but on the other hand, one has to discriminate between, in so many ways, a devotee has to discriminate between what is a favorable situation for my advancement and what isn't, between devotees who are good association and those who are not. A devotee has to discriminate between right and wrong. So that means he has to see that there's something is wrong here. That is required for advancement in Krishna consciousness. But on the other, so that's the bad eye one should see with. And the good eye one should see that even so many things are wrong and we have to try and rectify them, or at least if we can't rectify, remove ourselves from that situation, or whatever the response may be that is most favorable for our advancement. But at the same time, we should always see with a good eye also that ultimately, just like Sureshwar Prabhu was saying, he's come to this seminar to see, am I part of the problem or part of the solution? So I said that ultimately there is no problem, because in Krishna consciousness there are no problems. Ultimately there are no problems, which may sound, some of our hard-headed realists will say, you can't say that, there are so many problems. And I'm going to talk about some of the problems. But we should understand that ultimately the only real problem is, yes, it's all about, we are the problem. What is the problem? We are the problem. Ultimately the problem is that we are not Krishna conscious. That is the mother of all problems, and the father also. So reality, that's these three words, realities of ISKCON today. So then the next question comes, what is ISKCON? ISKCON means the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So ultimately, ISKCON is there wherever devotees are cooperating to serve Srila Prabhupada's orders. Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Where there is Krishna consciousness, particularly as given by Srila Prabhupada, that we can say, even the attempt to be Krishna consciousness, to be in Krishna consciousness, that is, in the broadest sense of the term, ISKCON. And we also have the registered, or the formal society. Some people say, well, that's just an institution. But it's Prabhupada's institution, it's Prabhupada set up. It's not to be discarded. It's not some people, well, it's just a material institution. It's not a material institution, it's a spiritual institution, because its purpose is to serve Krishna. So, what is ISKCON? Well, it's very difficult to define fully, as we can see when we come to this Mayapur festival. ISKCON is a very big organization. And even to list all the different programs that are going on in all the different countries, and even sometimes you see the list of centers and you see the names of some of the countries and you never heard of the countries before. ISKCON is spread so widely, with so many projects and so many places. It's a very big organization. So what each individual devotee in ISKCON considers to be ISKCON may be different. I mean, I see devotees here from Russia, devotees here from Dubai, from India, from USA. And it's quite nice to see more devotees from America this year. Usually only Americans, practically. That's a long time. So there are devotees from different places in the world. And the reality or the state of health of ISKCON in your particular area is probably different to that in other areas. In some places, ISKCON is very vibrant and dynamic and expanding, and in other places, ISKCON in the whole country, it means there's one or two brahmacharis trying to carry things along. So, reality, for some people, if we're going to talk about some of the hard-headed realities, to some of you, it may seem like, everything's wonderful, what's the problem? What is the problem? Well, in a hard-headed term, what we often see, unfortunately, is that then another question may come, why are we going to discuss this at all? It's all blissful here and wonderful, and everything is true, everything's blissful and wonderful. Because this is the spiritual world, and spiritual existence means to be with many devotees and chant and dance and be happy. But then, what we've often seen, to talk in terms of hard-headed realism, is that many devotees, they are enjoying the bliss of Krishna consciousness, very happy, maybe coming to Mayapur or in their own area or whatever, chanting Hare Krishna and being happy. But all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, they are confronted with some difficulties which they didn't expect in a spiritual movement, and being unable to reconcile in their minds the difficulties or the discrepancies which they, with their two eyes and with all their senses, can perceive. They perceive something is seriously wrong here. If this is spiritual life, then I don't want anything to do with it. And then you don't see them anymore. And ISKCON goes on, or they may say, it's not ISKCON, it's gone. You can't translate that in Russian very easily. That we used to hear quite often, it's gone. People used to say, ISKCON, it's gone. But the people who say that, actually they've gone and ISKCON is going on. So they may, then we get a whole category of devotees or whatever you want, anyway, who to justify, I don't want to analyze their psychology too much, but their the main thrust of their focus is simply pointing out the faults in ISKCON to show that actually it's a very wicked, corrupt organization. And you can also, apart from your local situation, judging the reality of ISKCON, you can also judge ISKCON from what you see on the internet, and it's pretty dangerous. It's like, I compare the internet to, if you want to surf the internet, it's like going through a fish market. You're going to get some bad smell. So, there are people who, they seem to, their whole meditation is how to prove that the leaders, especially the leaders of ISKCON, are all actually demons, whose only motive is to dupe the persons under them. And therefore, these persons, out of their great compassion, are transmitting reality to you, that actually you are being cheated. You should not be in this way. So, just a few minutes ago, we were talking about reality of being Krishna dancing in Rasa Leela, and now we have come to the terrestrial reality, or the down-to-earth reality of considering, well, there are some, apart from the dancing and chanting and being happy in ISKCON, there are at least some persons who would have us believe that ISKCON is basically an evil organization. And if we are to consider their accusations, we will find that many times the accusations or the allegations are not without truth. If we examine not only with the good eye but also with the bad eye, we will see that there are, again from the terrestrial point of view, there are many problems in our society. Our society, yes. Krishna's society, Prabhupada's society, and it's our society. We are taking part in this movement and we are also part of it. It's those who give their life to ISKCON, we can say this is our movement also. We're all in this together. So we're going to discuss realities of ISKCON today. Yesterday, all my troubles seemed so far away. Now it seems that they are here to stay. I believe in yesterday. See, I also come from the same background as you. Nobody sat on a big chair, but I come from the same schoolroom as you come from. So these are words of whisper, words of wisdom. So yesterday, there are some devotees who harp on the good old days. In the good old days of ISKCON, everything was good. That was yesterday. And now it's today. So, ISKCON today as compared to yesterday. Let us note down a few points of difference between ISKCON yesterday. We can say in the good old days, that means when Prabhupada was here. And then, of course, after Prabhupada left, then the bad boys moved in and took everything over. So, how is ISKCON different to what it was previous to and up to November the 14th, 1977? So ISKCON is different in various ways, and maybe some of you can suggest some points that I didn't think of in making this little synopsis. Here are a few points I thought of. One way in that ISKCON is different to in 1977 is that it's a lot bigger. There are many, many more members of ISKCON, and ISKCON is spread widely in many countries. For instance, in Russia, we never thought, not in any of us, so very proud of that within our lifetimes we didn't expect Krishna consciousness to spread widely in Russia, for instance. But not only in so many countries. Actually, when Prabhupada departed this world, this movement was not spread nearly in many, many countries. It wasn't spread, it was still in a very, what do you call it, germ stage, what's the word?
Embryonic.
Yeah, budding stage, embryonic stage. ISKCON Mayapur was, it was basically, there was one, that one building was built, this one building was built in Prabhupada, and the temple room, it was basically two buildings in the middle of fields. So Mayapur has developed so much, there's so many centers all over India and all over the world, so ISKCON is much bigger. So bigger means bigger problems also. That is inevitable. We should, realistically speaking, we should understand that. That bigger will mean there are bigger problems, more problems. But we do tend to take it for, there's a tendency to kind of take it for granted that the movement is much bigger and it continues to grow despite various occasional volcanoes, explosions, or more like implosions. You know what implosion means? It's the opposite of an explosion. An explosion, everything goes like this. In an implosion, everything goes like this. So despite all these things, ISKCON does continue to grow. There are many, many more books published, Children's Proverbs books, other books. Of course, this could be said to be a subjective. What I'm going to say now could be said to be subjective, but it's not unreasonable to say that devotees are more mature now. You would expect that as time goes on, devotees will become more mature in their outlook, in their dealings in so many ways. Now, one very great difference between ISKCON in the 1970s and now is a demographic one. That most of in the 1970s, almost all the members or initiated devotees in ISKCON lived in temples. There weren't so many grahastha devotees, and they almost all lived in temples. It was unusual that there were initiated devotees or any serious devotees not living in temples. There was ISKCON that's inside the four walls, and if you're outside the four walls, you're in Maya. Krishna consciousness goes as far as the door. Outside, it's all Maya. If you're living outside, you're in Maya. That was it, pretty much. Nowadays, most of the members of ISKCON don't live in temples. Most of the initiated members, and even devotees who are doing a lot of service in so many ways, they don't live in temples. Which actually in the 1970s, we couldn't imagine that either. We just thought ISKCON's going to grow more and more, means we're going to open more and more temples, and then, ultimately everyone's just going to be one big temple. So that's another change. Now, another point I saw, there was last year that we were getting reports of ISKCON's Rath Yatra in London being organized, and it was described how they got prime time TV coverage, and it was one of the biggest festivals in England throughout the year in terms of numbers of people attending. Very big and successful festival, and at the end of it, one MP, Member of Parliament or Lord or some, part of what is called the establishment. You don't have a term for that in Russian, I don't think so. It's a very British or American when I said that also. So he said to one of our devotees, now you are part of the establishment. That means part of the established social order. In the 1970s, our movement was considered weird, crazy, that was general perception. Rebellious. It was against the social order. Many people, they didn't like it. Ordinary, down-to-earth, honest citizens of the world in general, they thought that this movement is, and there are still many people who think like that, thought that this movement is a social anomaly and it's something crazy and wrong. But Lord such and such or MP such and such said that now you are part of the establishment. Now I don't know whether that's good, because personally I don't want to be part of the establishment. But it shows that, at least in many eyes, our movement is socially accepted, which it wasn't previously. Even in India, there was some level of social acceptance, but until maybe the mid-80s, many people in India thought that our movement, or they suspected that our movement was a CIA operation. And quite seriously, the question even came up in Parliament, in the Indian Parliament. Someone put up the question, is ISKCON, is it part of the CIA? It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, if we had American government money, we wouldn't mind, but of course there are some people who still say that there are people planted by the American government in our movement. I don't know about that. I don't have that much insight on reality. You never know. So, Hare Krishna. There's another sarcasm. Don't quote me on that. So, you have to be careful what you say. You know, it'll be on the internet tomorrow. It's on there now. Live broadcast. Bhaktivedanta Swami suspects that there are CIA plans in ISKCON. Okay, so one difference, one inevitable result of time between 1977 and 2003 is that the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, what's an inevitable result of time? They're older. Mostly in our movement in the 1970s, young people were joining. When I joined, anyone over 25 was considered a ripe old man or woman. There were very few old devotees who were older, physically older. So sometimes people used to ask us, well, where are the older people? And now sometimes they ask us, where are the younger people? In places where we're not making so many devotees. Then the older ones are still left, but another demographic change. There's more. There are devotees from all age groups. And one thing that more intelligent. So, one very wonderful thing that we're seeing, which again we couldn't have imagined very much in the good old days, is that people of all age groups are taking to Krishna consciousness very seriously. And we see in all parts of the world that people, even in the old, which we couldn't imagine previously, that they're taking to Krishna consciousness. So these are some more changes. So I was saying the public acceptance has increased. Devotees are no longer seen so much as being weird. Unfortunately, in some places, not only are they no longer seen as weird, but they're no longer seen at all, hardly. I had that experience a few years ago. I visited America. I was walking around in New York City, and a lot of people, I saw many people, Haribol! So people were saying, well, I haven't seen it for about 20 years. What happened? So, devotees are often worried, what did the public think about us? But I would think in many places the problem is that the public are not thinking about us at all. They don't even know anything about us. Actually, I'll relate a very sad experience from last summer in Dublin in Ireland. We were on a Harinam party and I was handing out leaflets. And one young lady asked me, well, what's all this? I said, well, this is the Hare Krishna movement, and we chant Hare Krishna, this and that. I said, what? And she said, I never heard of that. I asked her, where are you from? She said, New York City. She's about 25 years old. Never heard of the Hare Krishna. So this is reality, as I have perceived it, is that for all that we take ourselves very seriously and we argue, does the Jiva come from Vaikuntha or from the Brahma Jyoti, so many things like this. We take ourselves very seriously, but from the external point of view, we talk about, how when we take over the world, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But from the external point of view, our movement, it's not a very significant part of human society in the world in 2003. It is significant. It's the only thing that's significant in the world. Everything else is completely meaningless, ultimately. But from the social point of view, our movement is, in the Western countries, it could be seen as something that survived the hippie days, just about. Even in India, ISKCON it's well known. You'll find in the newspaper they'll put picture, they'll put ISKCON devotees, they'll put a photograph. I just saw in the Bengali newspaper some photo of. There's a report, very strict security at ISKCON Mayapur. They just put ISKCON. In other words, it's a household word among educated people in India, ISKCON. So that's good. But at the same time, it's not that our movement is very influential in influencing government politics or any such things. Not to say that we can't be, but at the present time, our movement from an external point of view, as it was in 1977, even though it's better accepted, we haven't really impacted upon the current affairs of the world, or the ongoing way of life of the world. Not in a. Of course, we have done, in as much as that. Actually, in subtle ways, our movement has been and is very influential. For instance, we'll find that in the American psyche, the concept of karma has entered, which it wasn't there, say, 30 years ago. The concept of karma wasn't even known to most people, and people had any interest in it, or if they believed in it, they were considered weird. But nowadays, it's in the English dictionary, and it's in the English dictionary. It's a commonly used word. Now, most people who believe in karma, they may tend, in America, they may tend to think of it more as a Buddhist concept. Somehow or other, a lot of the preaching that ISKCON has done has gotten sidetracked into Buddhism, but the Buddhists, they're not preaching in the way. The very idea, I would say this is coming mainly from the distribution of Prabhupada's books. They're having their effect. Now, of course, I was speaking what you could say a rather negative way about the acceptance of our movement. But again, it'll be different in different countries. I mean, what our movement is in Africa and how it's accepted, how it's seen, I have no idea. It's such a big movement and we can't know everything that's going on everywhere. But I would say in America, most people don't know us. But then again, there are many young people, especially in America, who they may not know very much about us, but they have a general impression that this is a genuinely spiritual movement. You're nodding your head there. So you're a young man from America who's now a Vaikuntha Dut, a messenger of the spiritual world. So you're moving with that society, and he can attest to the fact that among the young, I guess you could say more intellectual type or whatever in America, that there is some awareness of our movement and in good esteem. They think of our movement as being something genuinely spiritual. Now, one very big difference between pre-1977 ISKCON and 2003 ISKCON is that in that... How is this? 5:15. Is that in 1977 there was Prabhupada. That's a lot of difference. Now, some people say that no, Prabhupada never left, and that's also true in one sense, but in a very real sense, also, it's very real to say that Prabhupada never left. But it's also very real to say that he hasn't left. And it makes a difference. When Prabhupada was personally here, there were so many controversies. Don't think that all the controversies began on November 15th, 77. There were many controversies, many problems, many wild, weird and wonderful things going on. But Prabhupada was there, and Prabhupada was able to resolve them. One thing because devotees respected Prabhupada's words so much, and another because Prabhupada was very expert in dealing with devotees, and many of the big controversies and big problems that are going on and on in our movement, we could presume that Prabhupada would give these, when controversies came up, Prabhupada would give this siddhanta, or the clear exposition of these problems, and that would be it. Prabhupada said, and not only said, but explained this is the situation, and then it was accepted. For instance, there was a very big controversy in 1975 about the relative positions of renunciates, brahmacharis and sannyasis, vis-a-vis grihasthas. And it was, as I was saying, at that time, mostly the number of grihasthas in our movement was much less, and the brahmacharis and sannyasis were mostly saying, well, grihastha means you're practically useless. So Prabhupada gave the siddhanta that, actually, without Krishna consciousness, everyone is useless. But anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness, they should be accepted and not mal-judged due to their ashram. So there was Prabhupada. It made a lot of difference, we can say, to the situation now. There were not many gurus in our movement. Nowadays there are many. Of course, Prabhupada is the guru of our movement. He's the founder of ISKCON. Guru in ISKCON means who is a faithful follower of Prabhupada, but still different gurus have different insights or outlooks. It's interesting, isn't it? Insight and outlook. Insight, what goes on in your head, and outlook, how you see everything outside, depends on what goes on inside. So different insights, different outlooks, different approaches, hopefully, which is one of the things I discussed, hopefully within what Prabhupada has given us. So that's a difference. I'm not at this point going to comment on the various nuances of that difference, but that's a difference. ISKCON is different in that way. That previously Prabhupada was the only initiating guru in ISKCON, and now there are many initiating gurus in ISKCON. That's another difference. Now, another difference is that at that time, GBCs and other authorities were highly respected, which is still true to some extent in some parts of the world. But in general, I think it's quite safe to say that the respect that was accorded to temple presidents, sannyasis, GBCs, and authorities in our movement is less than it used to be. Now, in the 1970s, as I said, devotees call it the good old days. Although if we asked them to go back to the way of living at that time, I don't know how many would, because it was often very rough. For instance, when I joined the temple, it was snowing outside and there was no heating inside. And that was quite common. I think in some places in Russia it's going on even now. But that was quite Satsuru Maharaj related, or someone was saying in Boston. In their first temple they had that it was a rough area, so they gave up putting mending the windows because they just get bricks through them. People would throw bricks through the windows, so they just didn't bother having windows. And then sometimes you'd wake up in the morning and there'd be all snow piled up against your sleeping bag. That's true. You were there.
That's right, John.
So we have. It's not simply
folk tales.
So these were some of the realities also. So reality. Good old days. Sorry, good old days. So some of the realities you wouldn't like to go back to. But why are we talking about good old days? You want to go back to the good old days. So if someone's asking the good old days, what should we do? Should we bring a bunch of ice and pile it on them while they're sleeping and tell them that we want to go back to the good old days? So we're just helping you. That's all. But what are they referring to? They're not referring to the snow piled up on their sleeping bag, but they're referring to the mood by which devotees were happy to tolerate all kinds of austerities and difficulties. They were so happy to be in the association of devotees and serving Krishna. So in our movement at that time, the general mood, and one that was, we can say, is definitely pushed very strongly by Srila Prabhupada, the mood was one of Nishkam Bhakti. No personal desire. Surrender to Krishna. Just surrender, that's all. Immediately. Whatever your attachments are, give them up. Join the temple. Like I said, there is only in the temple and outside. So if you want to become, what do I have to do to become Krishna? You have to, just like Lord Jesus Christ said, sell all your goods and come and join me. That was it. Just surrender. No personal desires. Do whatever is required. Don't sleep, practically. No sleeping. We didn't say no eating. There's plenty of eating. But many sacrifice, taking on austerity, a very blissful mood. Because devotees, we just want to serve. I would say that is the general mood. Of course, reality eventually impinged upon this idealistic mood, and devotees found that, well, I was trying to surrender, but I found in the back of my consciousness a very big, huge stockpile of material desires. So maybe realistically our movement has come to accept the fact that, well, we're not all going to become Paramahamsas immediately. And therefore there is consideration of family life, and family life having children, and then some not, as is sometimes said, artificially trying to be fully certain, but maybe taking a little slowly. In other words, that mode of nishkam, or just full surrender, that has become, maybe we can say realistically or pragmatically, that has become mixed up with, or we can say there is also a mood of sakarma bhakti, that devotees are performing devotional service, but even though their ultimate aim is, or hopefully should be, to become pure devotees, also recognizing that I'm now at a particular stage, and I have to, while aiming for the highest stage, also take note of the fact that I'm at a particular level. I have to act at that level and try to gradually become purified, which is accepted within Vedic culture. This is varnashram, that one accepts what is his present position, aims for the highest reality while acting within his present position. So Prabhupada was always talking about varnashram, and this varnashram is to recognize the reality of our present ineptness or our present imperfection. So devotees are hankering for the good old days, but practically speaking, that mood of vibrancy which comes when all the devotees are simply trying to surrender at every moment. Of course, every devotee should try to do that, but if one is in a family situation, has to support children and all these things, then note that the desire to fully surrender shouldn't be there, but it also, practically, it has to be mixed with some pragmatic adjustment to the material world also. So it may be overly idealistic to expect that a movement can maintain at an extremely high level of vibrancy and full surrender forever, because it's just not so easy for everyone to be fully Krishna conscious immediately. So the freshness, at that time Krishna consciousness was a new movement. So anything new, generally it's very fresh and new and exciting. So now our movement it's not as new as it used to be. Krishna consciousness is intrinsically fresh and exciting, but at the same time, practically our movement has developed. It's bigger, it's an institution, it has rules and so many things. So we'll talk about that later also, hopefully, if you have time. I have another 3 days. So the institutionalization of our movement has naturally tends to put the tendency is for some dampener to be there. Now, in our movement, in 1977, there was no influence of the Gaudiya Math, or Gaudiya Math practically it wasn't a factor. Ritvikism, there was no poisoning controversy, there was no changed books controversy, and so on. Now, I would say, this is maybe more of a subjective statement, that our movement has become influenced by various things that Prabhupada didn't teach us. It has become influenced by modern academic ideas, pseudo ragamag. Nowadays in our movement we hear lots more we didn't hear Prabhupada talking. Prabhupada didn't tell stories of Radha and Krishna dancing in the forest of Vrindavan in his lectures. So these things are there, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Others, or we may discuss that, whether it's good or bad or somewhere in between. But that is a factor. Our movement is. There are various influences upon our movement, or various ways or various moods which were not there. Devotees at that time there were only Srila Prabhupada's books in our movement. Now there are many, many other books, which some people say, well, there should only be Prabhupada's books. I don't agree with that, because I'm writing books also. And apparently Prabhupada had said that my disciples will write purports on my books. And writing is a natural function. Writing is kirtan, writing about Krishna. So it's going to go on, and it's a sign that there are so many books being written, even if they're about various polemic subjects. It shows that there's some vibrancy and life and intellectual life in our movement. If there weren't books being written, I would think it'd be more of a problem. So there are many, but a result, or is it a result, or it's you could say a supervening effect, which means that it's not necessarily a result of, but it is there. That there are so many things to read that devotees often they don't read Prabhupada's books so much. They read so many other books. but they don't read Prabhupada's books so much, which means that they're... Anyway, what the result of that is we can discuss later, but I personally consider there's some problem there. In many ways, devotees devotees are more innocent in as much as they only knew Prabhupada, and they didn't know so much about history. I mean, when I'm talking about history, I'm talking about a whole Vaishnava history, and they tended to accept. Prabhupada said, okay, fine, that's enough. Nowadays, you'll find devotees arguing, and Prabhupada said this, but he meant something else, or this and that. We're not as innocent as we used to be. So, our movement today is changed from 1977. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because change is inevitable. That is the very nature of this material world. Change will always be there. Devotees sometimes think, well, it should be exactly the way it was in 77. It's not possible. Because material circumstances at least change. The essence must stay the same. If the essence is changed, if we're promoting something which is intrinsically different to that which was given by Srila Prabhupada, then there's a problem. If that has changed, then there's a problem. But if our movement is, in essence, teaching and practicing the same things that Srila Prabhupada taught us, then whatever extrinsic changes may be there, and there will be and there must be, then we can understand. This is my thesis, that if we are actually following Srila Prabhupada, or if the sincere endeavor is there to do so, then despite all the perceived problems in ISKCON, then we're on the right track. And as much as we follow Srila Prabhupada, that much our movement will prosper and grow and be successful. And as much as we don't follow Srila Prabhupada, then we'll again become mice, to use the example that Srila Prabhupada gave. Punat Mushiko Bhava, again become a mouse. You all know the story. The yogi converted the mouse to a cat, to a dog, to a tiger, and back again to a mouse. So, these are some of the differences. I have a lot of things to discuss. We have another 3 days to do so. I want to give some time for discussion, and this discussion go on and on and on. Now that question, why am I bringing this up? The question may come, why am I bringing this up with Gaurapanini? I'm just supposed to chant, dance, and be happy, and we can be miserable all the rest of the year. If we want to be miserable discussing it, why don't we just ignore all these? We just leave it. Just reality means to be with Krishna. Here we are in the Dham with Krishna. So that we can say that's the ra approach. Devotees of ra, everything's fine, everything's wonderful, there's no problems. That's one kind of approach. And the other is the na approach. No, everything's wrong. Everyone in ISKCON's corrupt. It's all bogus. And it's all demons and so on. So those are two extremes. But neither approach is very satisfying to an intelligent person. Devotees are supposed to be intelligent people. We don't want to be a cult in which people just blindly follow. We have so much Shastra and explanation. It's not Bible. I believe in the Bible. And then, God has given us intelligence and He's given us Shastra, both. So we're supposed to use our intelligence to understand what is said in Shastra, how to apply that to all situations in this material world. And an intelligent person can understand that in any attempt to be any spiritual attempt in this material world, there are going to be problems. As Prabhupada said, don't expect utopia. Sometimes we read in the books that devotees are kind, compassionate, humble, meek. We think, well, everyone's just Often we find when devotees first come to Krishna consciousness, they're very naive and they think, well, everyone's just a complete pure devotee, and then they find out that, well, it's not 100% true in all respects, and then they may become disillusioned. This can happen very quickly. People come to Krishna consciousness, they go away, and they never really take it up. It can even come after many years of practicing Krishna consciousness. So we should understand that ISKCON is an idealistic movement in a world which is basically, it's a bad place. This material world is not a fit place for a gentleman. Particularly in Kali Yuga, people are prayanal palusha sabya kalavasmin yuge janaha mandasu mandanatiyo mandabhagahi kujutaha. In Kali Yuga, people have short lives. They are unlucky, of bad consciousness, sumandamatiyo, mandabhagya. They're dull-headed, and above all, their minds are always disturbed. So, people who are joining ISKCON, that means us, we all come from this background. We're all people coming to ISKCON. It's not that, there may be some persons who have come from the spiritual world to assist Prabhupada in his mission. Maybe. But even if that's accepted as true, and some people would vehemently deny that, the fact is that we say that Prabhupada came to save us. So we need saving. We're here in the category of being needed to be saved. So basically everyone coming to this movement is very pious. They're trying to become Krishna conscious. But at the same time we have that bag of garbage that we're carrying along with us. And we can, those tendencies, the tendencies are there, and they influence us and how we behave. So ISKCON is an idealistic movement in a far from ideal world. Therefore we should realistically not expect or demand utopia or think that everything in ISKCON is rotten, because what I perceive of it isn't what you would expect, or what I would expect from seeing a movement with such high principles. So this is realistic. This is a useful realism to understand what is the essence of ISKCON. The essence of ISKCON is pure devotional service. And if we look, if we interact with ISKCON in a certain way, we can find so many bad things and conclude that it's all rotten. If we interact with it in another way, we can become pure devotees of Krishna. Because despite all the difficulties, although some would contest this, despite all the difficulties, ISKCON is not gone, it's going on. And there is the opportunity to become a pure devotee of Krishna by taking advantage of the facilities that ISKCON offers. And facilities doesn't mean simply the buildings, but it means the opportunity to associate with devotees and engage in Krishna conscious activities. So, the example is given by Rupa Goswami Prabhupada in his Upadeshamrita. He's giving in another context. He gives the example of the Ganga, which is a supremely pure river. Ganga is so pure that if you bathe in the Ganga, you become purified internally and externally. At the same time, it is seen that in the Ganga there is mud and foam. But as Prabhupada describes in his purport, an intelligent person, he sees the mud and the foam, but he just clears it away and takes his bath. He's not overwhelmed by the presence of the mud and foam. He doesn't say, I came here to take a bath, but it's all muddy and foamy, so if I take a bath here, I'll just get more dirty. But he thinks, no, let me just clear this away and take my bath and I'll become purified. So the opportunity is there to become purified. There's always a gap between the ideal and the real. There's always a gap between idealism and pragmatism. One should not simply be a sentimental idealist because he will be disappointed. And then he'll go away and lose the opportunity to attain the ideal, which is pure devotional service, which is obtainable by those who pragmatically understand that we are within the material world, we're in a movement which is aiming at the ideal, but realistically speaking, there may be various problems, some of them very severe. But despite that, we should take advantage of the opportunity offered and go on to become Krishna conscious. So I'll finish here today, and we can have a few minutes of discussion. I'm sure there are many, many things to be discussed. We're all, we can all see so many things which shouldn't be there, and how to deal with them, and this and that. We have a few more days, so we can discuss also. Suresh, I presume you wanted to say something? Please. Suresh Prabhu, you probably don't know unless you used to read the BTGs.
You can recognize me. No farmer clothes.
Suresh Prabhu is a pragmatic idealist. He believes in Prabhupada's instructions of simple living and high thinking. Work the land, chant Hare Krishna, and live on farm. So all glories to Suresh Prabhu. Prabhupada's son.
Raktitika Swami ki
Hi. Those of you who are Indian can understand that means the opposite of Jai.
Maharaj, I think what spoke to me or many things spoke to me. Many things spoke to me, but when you mentioned toward the end about we're just not sticking with Prabhupada's words, his books. And this really is so important because, as you mentioned, as the world changes, as we externally change, we need to stay grounded in what I like to call Vani Prabhupada, because what Vaku Prabhupada had a chance to show us was by Prabhupada's own admission. Oh, he said 50%, he said half. That means that we must know Vani Prabhupada, Prabhupada and his instructions to really get the full Srila Prabhupada.
I intend to discuss this one.
Great. So, that's all I wanted to say for now.
It was a very good point to see world.
Is the sound coming? No. Shake it about a little, the wire.
Hare Krishna. It was a very good point that you said devotees should see world through two eyes, bad and good. And I wonder how we should see Holy Dharma, now, because I'm trying to see only through good eye, but I can see some difficulties.
Yeah. Yes, we should. It's not that when we come to the Holy Dham that we suspend our powers of discrimination. When you go to outside the gate and you ask for rickshaw to the guard and he says 5,000 rupees, you shouldn't give it to him. You shouldn't think, well, he is a resident of the Dham and everything he does is completely pure. You should understand he's trying to cheat you. So we should be realistic also. Yes. You have to speak louder because this isn't understood.
Is it then wrong to make distinction between ISKCON, as Prabhupada has given us, like a spiritual process which will take us back to Godhead, and ISKCON as institution about the politics and changes to which all material things go? To make it
Well, there is a distinction between the... Did everyone hear the question? No?
Rephrase it.
Is it correct to make a distinction between ISKCON, as Prabhupada said it should be, and ISKCON as we see it is, with the institutionalism and the politics? Is that more or less what you said?
on one side the spiritual process which will take us
Is it right to make a distinction between the spiritual process and the down-to-earth, hard realities? Distinction, yes, but at the same time it's understood that the spiritual process is being enacted within the sphere of this material world, and that's part of the directions on how to practice the spiritual process. Some of the very important instructions are on how to deal with this material world. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asked, what is the sign of a Vaishnava? The first thing he said is, Asat Samgatiyari Vaishnava Achar. That a Vaishnava is distinguished, or his proper behavior is to give up bad association. So there are so many injunctions to accept that which is favorable, to reject that which is unfavorable. So the spiritual process doesn't take place in a vacuum. It takes place within the sphere of this material world. Now we try, ISKCON is an attempt to create an atmosphere that is favorable for making spiritual progress. Sometimes it may be, some devotees think, well, I'd be better off outside ISKCON, because the way I see it practiced in my backyard, I don't find it very favorable. But that actually wasn't Prabhupada's, that wasn't his response. I'm going to discuss this actually. That Prabhupada's response was to work to improve the situation, not to give up the situation. I intend to discuss this in some detail. I don't have time for all this. There's so many things to discuss. Another 3 things up there. Okay, so we'll finish there. And then tomorrow I'll do it at the same time. I think I'll be coming back from... No, usually come back around from 1 to 2 o'clock like that. So by the time you come back and take rest and take bath, hopefully, if you're interested to come, you could come again tomorrow, and we'll discuss these topics which I believe they're important, therefore I'm discussing them. I think they're important for all of us, for our own bhajan, or our own progressive development in Krishna consciousness, and also so that we're going to come across so many different things which we don't want to, but we know there may be so many difficulties, so to help ourselves to remain steady on the path of Krishna consciousness, despite all inevitable difficulties in this material world, and also to we can preach to others who may be very much disturbed by various difficulties. So we can try and discuss some of these various points. So if you'd like to come, please come again tomorrow. 4:20, yes. Now, I'm finished yet. Almost. Now, as I said, I'm also writing books. What I have to say, I put the most important things in writing. This is service to Srila Prabhupada, to preach to devotees and others through books. So, preaching to devotees through books means I have to distribute them, so if anyone of you would like to see some of my books, they're being offered here. Here's the Hindi to Bengali dictionary, if you don't know. So as you were saying, that well, following Srila Prabhupada, so here's some of my realizations and others' realizations on following Prabhupada. It's a book called Jai Srila Prabhupada. There are some other books, some translated Ramayana, Brahmacharya Krishna Consciousness, Beginner's Guide to Krishna Consciousness, Message to the Youth of India, and various other books. So if you'd like to help me in my service to Srila Prabhupada, please take some of these books. Hare Krishna.